The morning my son chose a mountain vacation over my hospital bed, he did not know he was also choosing life without my money. He asked the nurse one question, "Is he dying?" When she said no, he told her he had a flight to catch. I called him myself 3 hours later, with blood drying beneath 11 stitches and my right arm strapped against my chest. I said, "Evan, I need you here." He lowered his voice and answered, "Dad, Brooke has planned this weekend for a year. You are stable. Please do not make me choose between my wife and another one of your emergencies." That night, they posted a photograph from a luxury lodge beneath the caption, "Family is the people who show up." I stared at it from a hospital room where neither of them had shown up. The next morning, I stopped the monthly transfer that paid their mortgage, their SUV, their childcare, and most of the life they presented online as self-made. By Thanksgiving, my son was sitting across from me demanding to know how a father could abandon his own family. My name is Thomas Reed. I was 64 when this happened, and until that week, I believed sacrificing for my son was simply another word for loving him. I live in Cary, North Carolina, in a red brick house with a deep front porch, 2 oak trees, and a garage filled with tools I have owned longer than some marriages last. I spent 37 years managing construction and maintenance projects for a public school district. I was the man principals called when a gym roof leaked, a boiler failed, or a contractor promised something that the building could not physically support. My job was not glamorous, but it was stable. I earned a pension, carried excellent health insurance, and came home most nights before 6. I chose stability because my son, Evan, needed one parent whose life did not keep changing. His mother, Laura, left when he was 12. She did not disappear completely. She called on birthdays, mailed gifts, and visited when work brought her through North Carolina. But she moved to California, remarried, and built another life. The daily work remained with me. I packed lunches, attended parent conferences, drove to soccer practices, sat in urgent care waiting rooms, helped with college applications, and learned how to make 3 dinners because Evan changed his favorite food every 2 months. I do not say that for applause. Parenting is not a favor children repay. I say it because the history mattered when Evan later looked at me like I was a bank account that had developed inconvenient feelings. Evan was bright, social, and naturally persuasive. Teachers forgave late work because he apologized beautifully, and I often stepped between him and consequences. I paid fees, replaced broken phones, and called coaches, telling myself I was giving him room to grow. In reality, I taught him that growth was optional whenever I remained nearby. He attended North Carolina State and studied communications. I paid his tuition, rent, books, and a used car because I wanted him to graduate without financial panic. When he needed an extra semester after ignoring a required course, I covered it too. At graduation, he hugged me and called me the best father in the world, and I mistook that sentence for proof that all the rescuing had been love. He met Brooke Lawson at a networking event in downtown Raleigh. Brooke handled social media for boutique fitness studios and knew how to make ordinary life look aspirational. Their first apartment had white furniture, a tiny balcony, and costs their salaries did not support. When they leased a luxury SUV because Brooke said clients judged appearances, Evan asked me to help for 6 months. That 6 months became 5 years. When they married, I paid for most of the wedding and their honeymoon flight because Evan said starting without debt would let them build something solid. At the reception, he hugged me and said everything good in his life had started because I refused to give up on him. I believed him. 2 years later, they purchased a townhouse in Raleigh's North Hills area with quartz counters, a rooftop terrace, and a payment far beyond their income. Evan asked for temporary help with the down payment, then closing costs, then monthly expenses. By the time their daughter Sophie was born, I was transferring $4,500 every month for the mortgage, childcare, and SUV. I also kept an emergency card in Evan's name. Soon it paid for meal deliveries, exercise equipment, resort deposits, and professional family photographs. Whenever I questioned a charge, they called modern life expensive. Meanwhile, Brooke posted about creating abundance, and Evan wrote that a man's job was to create security for his family. I paid the property tax shortage beneath that post. My sister Janet noticed. At lunch one Sunday, she asked why I still drove an old pickup while Evan leased a luxury SUV. I said my truck ran. She replied, "You are terrified that if you stop solving his problems, he will stop calling." I told her he was my son. She said, "That describes the relationship. It does not explain the invoice. One day you will need him as a person instead of needing him to need you." I hope he knows the difference. The accident happened on the Friday before Thanksgiving. I had spent the morning inspecting repairs at an elementary school, where a storm had damaged part of the roof. I was officially retired, but the district occasionally hired me for short consulting projects because I knew the buildings and contractors. Around 2 in the afternoon, I stopped at a home improvement store for weather stripping. On the drive back, a landscaping truck ran a red light and struck the driver's side of my pickup. The impact spun me across the intersection and into a concrete divider. I remember the airbag, the smell of something burned, and a stranger shouting not to move. Then I remember fluorescent lights and a nurse named Marisol asking whether I knew my name. I had a fractured collarbone, 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, and 11 stitches above my left temple. The doctors wanted to keep me for observation because I had briefly lost consciousness. When Marisol asked whom to call, I gave her Evan's number without hesitation. That instinct survived every warning Janet had given me. When you are hurt and frightened, you do not call the person who receives the most money. You call the person you still believe is your child. Marisol returned from the hallway, wearing the careful expression nurses use when the injury is no longer the worst part of the conversation. She said Evan knew where I was. When I pressed her, she admitted he had asked whether I was dying. After she said I was stable but needed family present, he replied that he had a vacation to catch. I stared at the ceiling. Evan and Brooke were scheduled to fly to Aspen that evening for Brooke's 35th birthday and a Friendsgiving retreat with 3 other couples. The trip had been planned for months. I knew because I had covered the resort deposit after Evan claimed an annual bonus was delayed. At 7 that night, I called him myself. Airport announcements echoed behind his voice. "Dad, how are you feeling?" "I have a broken collarbone." "I know," the nurse explained. "Then why are you at the airport?" Silence. Then Brooke said something in the background. "We are already through security," he replied. "The trip is non-refundable. I am in the hospital, and you are stable. I need you here, Evan." It took more for me to say those words than he will ever understand. I had been the reliable one for so long that asking felt like removing part of my skin. He sighed. "Dad, Brooke has planned this weekend for a year. Her friends are all going. You are not having surgery. Janet lives nearby. I called you. Please do not make me choose between my wife and another one of your emergencies." Another one. I had never called him from a hospital before. I had never asked him to cancel a trip. Yet in one sentence, he transformed my accident into a pattern of unreasonable need. "I understand," I said. "Good. I will check on you when we land. Will you?" "Of course. Love you, Dad." The line ended. I tried calling again 2 hours later because the doctor had questions about transportation after discharge. The call went directly to voicemail. My messages showed as undelivered. Evan had blocked my number. At 10:30, Brooke posted a photograph from the airport lounge. She and Evan held champagne glasses beneath the caption, "Protect your joy. Family is the people who show up for you." I looked at the image until the screen dimmed. The physical pain remained sharp, but something colder settled beneath it. My son knew exactly where I was. He simply preferred a room where he could be admired. Janet arrived 20 minutes later carrying my reading glasses, a phone charger, and the anger of a woman who had predicted the weather but still hated the storm. "Where is Evan?" she asked. I handed her the phone. She read the messages and closed her eyes. "I am not going to say I told you so. That would be a first." She sat beside the bed. "What do you need?" The question broke me more than Evan's absence. I cried quietly, partly from pain, partly from humiliation, and partly because my sister had asked in 5 words what my son could not offer in an entire phone call. I stayed in the hospital for 2 nights. Evan sent no message. Brooke posted photographs from the lodge, matching pajamas, cocktails beside a fire, mountain views, and a group dinner captioned, "Chosen family over everything." Janet helped me return home on Sunday. She arranged for a home health aide named Lila to visit each morning, prepared food, and moved a recliner into the downstairs office because lying flat hurt my ribs. My friend Dennis brought groceries and complained that my coffee tasted like roof sealant. People showed up. Not the people I had subsidized, but people whose names were not attached to any automatic transfer. On Monday morning, I called the bank. I stopped the $4,500 monthly payment. I removed Evan from the emergency credit card and canceled the automatic payments for the SUV and childcare account. I did not touch money that belonged to him. I did not empty shared accounts because we had none. I stopped sending my money into a household that had declared my pain less important than a vacation. The banker asked whether the change was temporary. No, I said. That single word felt heavier than the accident. I also updated my estate plan later that week, but I did not build revenge into it. I set aside a modest amount for Sophie's education under independent management and redirected most of what would remain after my death toward a scholarship for students entering construction trades. Evan would inherit personal family items if he wanted them, but not a financial life built around waiting for me to die. I made that decision calmly. Anger wants to punish. Clarity wants to stop the pattern. The transfer was scheduled to arrive Tuesday morning. At 8:16, Evan called from an unknown number. I let it ring. Brooke texted that something was wrong with the account, then complained their friends had covered breakfast after both cards declined. Evan called my decision childish, then warned that Sophie's daycare would suffer. I contacted the daycare directly and learned Brooke had already paid the month. They had used my granddaughter because they knew my heart had a door marked with her name. I changed that door into a window. I could still love her without letting her parents climb through. That evening, Brooke posted a vague message. Financial control is still abuse, even when it comes from a parent who believes generosity creates ownership. Friends responded with supportive comments. One person wrote, "You two work too hard to let toxic families steal your peace." I took a screenshot and turned off my phone. They returned from Aspen 4 days early and appeared at my house without warning. Evan's eyes moved across the stitches, brace, and bruising, but Brooke began with the money. She called ending the support dangerous. I reminded Evan that he had blocked me. He said he had been overwhelmed. I said, "I was in a hospital. Your cards are fine. They simply belong to you now." They asked to come inside. I refused. Evan called one mistake an unfair reason to destroy his family. I told him he still had a job, home, vehicle, and choices. He had lost only my subsidy. When Brooke protested that they could not maintain the townhouse, I told them to sell it. Then she asked about the lake cabin, where they planned a vow renewal using my property and catering money. I had learned that Brooke's parents would attend the ceremony while I had been invited only to brunch. "You planned photographs at my cabin and expected me to pay from outside the frame," I said. They called me cruel. I closed the door. Regret arriving the moment access disappears is not always remorse. Sometimes it is customer service. Thanksgiving took place at Janet's house. I considered staying home, but isolation would have allowed Evan and Brooke to control the story. More importantly, I wanted to see Sophie. Janet promised that if anyone raised a voice, she would hand him leftovers and direct him toward the driveway. I arrived early with Dennis. Lila had helped me button a clean shirt over the shoulder brace. Relatives filled the house by 4. Brooke entered carrying a pie from an expensive bakery. Evan held Sophie and avoided my eyes. Brooke's parents, Michael and Diane Lawson, were there because Janet had invited them months earlier. They greeted me politely but with visible caution. Brooke had clearly told them a version. Dinner began beneath a paper garland Janet's grandchildren had made. The room smelled like turkey, sage, and butter. For 20 minutes, everyone discussed football, school, and traffic. The silence around the actual conflict became another guest at the table. Then Michael Lawson asked Evan whether the vow renewal invitations needed to be reprinted because of the location issue. Janet looked at me. "Location issue?" Brooke said, "Thomas suddenly withdrew the lake house because he is angry about our vacation. I withdrew the lake house because I learned I was not invited to the ceremony." Diane Lawson frowned. "Of course you are invited. The invitation says Sunday brunch." Brooke placed her fork down. "We were trying to avoid tension by excluding the person providing the property." Evan sighed. "Dad, must we do this in front of everyone?" Janet answered, "You brought up the cabin in front of everyone." Brooke's eyes filled. "This has been the worst week of our marriage. Thomas cut off our mortgage support without warning, canceled Sophie's childcare account, embarrassed us in front of friends, and is now taking away our anniversary weekend." Several relatives turned toward me. Evan stared at his plate, allowing her version to stand. "Tell them why," I said. He remained silent. "Evan, you were hurt." "Where were you?" "Aspen." "After the hospital called?" "We were already leaving." Janet's husband stopped carving turkey. Michael Lawson looked at his daughter. "You went on the trip after learning Thomas was hospitalized?" Brooke said, "He was stable." I looked at Evan. What did you ask the nurse? He swallowed. I do not remember. She remembers. You asked whether I was dying. When she said no, you said you had a vacation to catch. Diane covered her mouth. Evan's face reddened. That sounds worse without context. What context improves it? We thought Janet would be there. You did not call Janet. Brooke said, this is exactly why we wanted boundaries at the ceremony. Thomas turns private mistakes into public punishment. I looked around the table. I did not mention the hospital until she described the financial cutoff as unexplained. I am correcting the story. Evan leaned forward. Fine. I should have come. I have said that. But stopping everything overnight was cruel. How much do I send you each month? He looked away. That is private. You made my decision public. Janet said, answer him. Brooke's father stared at Evan. Finally, he said, $4,500. The table went completely quiet. Diane whispered, every month? Temporarily, Brooke said. For 5 years, I replied. Mortgage, SUV, childcare, and household expenses. I also paid the Aspen resort deposit and was expected to provide the cabin and catering for a ceremony I was not invited to attend. Sophie reached for a dinner roll, unaware that the adult world had cracked open around her. I gave it to her. Brooke began crying. We never forced you. No. You simply treated every refusal as evidence I did not love you. Evan looked at me. You offered. I did. That is the part I am responsible for. I taught you that I would absorb every consequence. I made myself useful because usefulness felt safer than asking whether you respected me. His face changed. Anger remained, but something beneath it listened. I continued, I am not asking anyone here to hate you. I am not asking Brooke's parents to take sides. I am stating what changes. The monthly transfer is over. The emergency card is gone. The cabin is unavailable for the vow renewal. I will help Sophie directly with reasonable needs, but I will not move money through either of you. I will not pay your mortgage, vehicle, vacations, event deposits, or lifestyle expenses. You may sell the townhouse, change cars, adjust childcare, or increase income. Those are adult decisions. Brooke wiped her face. You are punishing Sophie. No, I am refusing to let you place her between me and a boundary. Evan whispered. What about my inheritance? The question escaped before he could stop it. Every person heard. Janet closed her eyes. I felt the final piece settle into place. You left your father in a hospital, came home when your cards failed, and during Thanksgiving dinner asked about what you receive when I die. Evan looked sick. That is not what I meant. It is what you asked. Brooke said, we need to plan responsibly. Dennis, who had remained quiet beside me, spoke. Responsible planning usually does not begin with another person's death. Evan pushed back from the table. So you are cutting me out completely? I created an education fund for Sophie. The rest of my estate will support trade scholarships and people who want to build lives with their own hands. You already changed it? Yes. Without speaking to me? It is my life. He stood. Everything you did was supposedly for me. That was my mistake. My life should not have been built entirely around keeping you comfortable. Brooke gathered Sophie's coat. Diane tried to calm her. Janet said nobody needed to leave. But Brooke insisted the dinner had become hostile. Evan remained near the table, torn between anger and shame. Before he followed her, he looked at me. You wanted me to fail. No. I stopped preventing you from finding out whether you can stand. They left. No one applauded. The turkey cooled. Janet cleared plates while relatives spoke in low voices. I felt no victory. I felt exhausted, sad, and strangely lighter. Boundaries do not always feel powerful when first spoken. Sometimes they feel like grief with better posture. The following weeks were quiet. Evan sold the SUV, Brooke increased her client work, and they listed the townhouse. They canceled the vow renewal and posted that they were simplifying life to focus on what mattered. Their life did not collapse. It adjusted. Without rescue, they discovered compromise. Sophie remained in daycare, they rented a smaller home, and Evan accepted a more demanding sales job. Natural consequences did more for their budget than every lecture I had avoided. Evan wrote me a letter in January. Not a text. 4 handwritten pages. He admitted that when the hospital called, his first thought had been that I would be fine because I was always fine. His second thought had been that Brooke would be furious if he canceled. His third had been that I would forgive him because I always did. I knew it was wrong before I boarded, he wrote. I blocked you because hearing your voice again might have forced me to admit it. He also admitted that the money had become invisible. At first, he felt grateful. Then he built expenses around it. Eventually, he treated the transfer as part of his salary and my questions as interference. He apologized without mentioning the inheritance or asking for the payment back. That mattered. I invited him to coffee at a diner near my house. He came alone. For the first 15 minutes, neither of us knew how to speak without returning to old roles. I asked whether he was angry. Yes, he said. At me? At you, Brooke, myself, the bank, the townhouse, all of it. Good. Anger is honest if you do not make it somebody else's bill. He almost smiled. Then he said, I kept thinking about the hospital. So did I. I am sorry for the real thing, Dad. Not the money. Not Aspen. I am sorry you asked me to come and I made you feel like a burden. My throat tightened. Thank you. Is that all? What else do you want? I do not know. Forgiveness? I can begin forgiving you. That does not restore the old arrangement. I know. Do you? I am learning. I admitted my part. I had solved too much because being needed made me feel safe after Laura left. Every transfer allowed me to believe Evan still depended on me in a way that guaranteed closeness. I had called it generosity, but some of it was fear. I made adulthood optional, I said. You still chose how to treat me. He nodded. Both things are true. We did not hug. Reed men are not skilled at dramatic gestures. But when he left, he turned at the door and said, I will call next week even if I do not need anything. He did. Slowly, we built a smaller, more honest relationship. Evan began calling without requests. Sometimes the conversations lasted 5 minutes. Sometimes he told me Sophie had learned a new word. Brooke did not apologize immediately. For months, she treated my boundary as an attack on her marriage. Then one afternoon, she asked to meet with me alone. She arrived without makeup, expensive sunglasses, or prepared language. I made your money part of our identity, she said. When it stopped, I felt humiliated because I had been telling everyone we built that life ourselves. Why did you exclude me from the ceremony? She looked down. My friends thought you were quiet and awkward. My parents were helping host. I told myself you would not enjoy it. But you expected my cabin. Yes. And my money? Yes. That was not thoughtlessness, Brooke. That was entitlement. Tears filled her eyes. I know. What are you asking from me? Nothing. Evan said an apology with a request attached would not count. That sentence told me my son was changing. I accepted the apology without promising closeness. She and I remained polite. Respectful distance is still a relationship. It is simply one with accurate measurements. I sold the lake cabin the following summer. Not because Evan had wanted it, but because maintaining 2 properties no longer matched the life I wanted. Part of the money funded the Thomas Reed Skilled Future Scholarship at Wake Tech. The scholarship supports adults entering electrical, plumbing, carpentry, and building maintenance programs. The first recipient was a 38-year-old single mother training as an electrician after years of low-wage retail work. At the ceremony, she shook my hand and said, "This changes what my children think is possible." That sentence meant more than being called the best dad in the world after paying a bill. The rest of the sale funded something equally important. Dennis and I took a long road trip through Tennessee and Kentucky. Halfway through, I realized I had gone an entire day without checking whether Evan had called. I did not feel rejected. I felt free. Today, my son and I speak regularly. The $4,500 transfer has never resumed. It never will. I buy Sophie birthday gifts, contribute directly to a small education account, and attend her preschool events when invited. Evan and Brooke live within their income. Their house is smaller, their vehicle is ordinary, their photographs are less polished, and, strangely, more believable. One recent post showed Sophie eating pancakes while Evan stood behind her with flour on his shirt. The caption contained no lesson about abundance or chosen family. It simply said, Saturday morning. I liked it. That was enough. I have also learned something uncomfortable about sacrifice. Parents often say they would give children everything. We should be careful. Giving everything can leave a child believing the parent has nothing else worth protecting. Money, time, health, plans, friendships, and dignity disappear into the role until the parent becomes a service instead of a person. I taught Evan that I was the man who handled things. He eventually forgot that the man could also be hurt. The accident did not create his selfishness. It revealed how completely both of us had accepted a relationship built around his needs and my silence. The most painful part was not that he went to Aspen. It was that he considered my absence from his vacation less disruptive than his absence from my hospital room. The most satisfying part was not watching his cards decline. It was seeing his life continue after my money stopped. He struggled, adjusted, worked, and discovered that a smaller life funded honestly contains more dignity than a luxurious one built on someone else's fear of being forgotten. My revenge, if that is what people want to call it, was not changing my will or canceling a transfer. It was refusing to convert my pain into another payment. It was closing the door when concern arrived wearing the face of financial panic. It was sitting at Thanksgiving dinner and telling the truth without shouting. It was learning that I could love my son without financing his avoidance, forgive him without restoring access, and remain his father without remaining his utility. Some relatives still think I acted too harshly. They say family should receive grace after one selfish decision. I agree about grace. I disagree that grace requires continuing the arrangement that made selfishness comfortable. Forgiveness can remove hatred. It does not have to restore the credit card. Love can remain. The automatic transfer does not have to. So tell me honestly, if your adult child left you alone in a hospital, blocked your calls, and returned only after the money stopped, would a sincere apology eventually be enough to rebuild the relationship? Or would you believe that some betrayals permanently change how close a parent and child should ever be again?